This is She's on Call, a weekly show hosted by ENT specialist Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and General Surgeon Dr. Marina Kurian. They'll be joined by guest experts to discuss an array of newsworthy medical and health issues. You're invited to ask the doctors anything. The physicians and their guests' views are their own and do not represent any institution. Please contact your doctor for any personal questions. Please hit share and join us live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at She's on Call. Hashtag She's on Call. Please welcome our hosts.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York and New Jersey, and I specialize in ears, but I do both right and left.
Too funny. I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon. I do minimally invasive surgery and a fair amount of weight loss surgery in New York City area. Today we have a great show for you guys. We're going to be talking to two wonderful guests about how the media is covering COVID-19 and how they really make it understandable for so many people.
Our guests today are Apoorva Mandavilli, who is an award-winning science and medicine reporter for the New York Times, and Dr. Nina Shapiro, who is a pediatric ENT surgeon and a correspondent for Forbes on all matters medical. We're very excited to bring both Apoorva and Nina on board.
And if you guys are watching and you want to share this because of the topics that we're going to be talking about and how best to report health, although we try to do that too weekly, but we have experts. So you can retweet this or share on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. And we're going to get started. You know, you guys all know who watch us regularly that we start off with a little bit of the news of the week. And this week has been just a spectacular week, I feel like.
Well, you know, we coined the term shielding over here at the conclusion of the election in November. But, you know, as Indian American women, we have an extra pride in the inauguration of Vice President Kamala Harris nationally on Wednesday. This is a picture of Kamala Harris resplendent in purple, her husband holding the Bibles that she was holding, and Joe Biden, our president, next to him. And, you know, she hails, yes, she is African American, she is Jamaican American, she is Indian American, she is American, and she is married to a Jewish man, and she is a Baptist. So all of these things are true, and to me, she is an American for that. Her mother's family hails from a small village in Tamil Nadu, actually very close to where my in-law family hails from. And they celebrated immensely when she was nominated and then elected. And then as part of her inauguration events, people were asked to send in paper rangolis, which are usually rice flour paintings on the floor that Indian women make traditionally in front of their house. Kamala's name means lotus, and so you can see the lotus representations in front of houses in India and abroad, heralding her arrival to the executive branch of the United States.
You know, I want to say that we just had a tweet on, yes, Biden is POTUS, and we have a lotus.
Yes, we do.
Here, okay? VP is a lotus, so that's what's happening. All right, you guys, it's time to introduce our guests. We're so excited to have Apoorva Mandavilli join us. And again, as Sujana said, she is an award-winning New York science reporter. As well, Dr. Nina Shapiro, who's a pediatric ENT surgeon and contributor for Forbes. And we're going to have a great chat with them, and we want to welcome them. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, you know, we want to get right into it. It seems like science has re-entered the dialogue. So we know that science has been elevated in the current administration. We have scientists front and center, including, but not limited to, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Nina, maybe you can tell us, you as in your hat as a healthcare reporter, what does that mean?
So it means a lot. It's really changing the way we think about how to write things, how to interpret things. It feels a little more pure that we can just give the information and know that the information is coming to us in a little more accurate sense. So it is such a good feeling. A lot of what I do in my writing is sort of busting myths. So I've spent a lot of time over the last year, and certainly over the last 4 years, sort of deciphering all the nonsense that we're hearing from the news, frankly. So it's a little bit of a change to just sort of spread the information as opposed to deciphering the falsehoods that we're hearing. So it's a little bit of a switch, which in a good way, of course.
You know, it is the 1-year anniversary of the first lockdown that we saw in Wuhan, China, due to COVID-19. It's the 1-year anniversary since the first COVID-19 case was reported in the United States. And we've had, as far as we know, over 25 million cases in the US. So Apoorva, you didn't start reporting, you know, in January 2020. You've been reporting on health and on medicine and science for a long time. Can you talk to us about what these numbers mean?
I haven't been reporting on infectious diseases actually for quite a while. So I used to write about HIV and TB many years ago. And for the last many years, I was leading a website on autism science. But when the pandemic hit, it was really an opportunity to cover the story of our lifetimes, and I couldn't pass that up. I think it's been very challenging to be a science journalist these last few months because the pace of information coming at us has been just fast and furious, and we don't get the usual time to really think about what a piece means. How does it fit into what we already know? You know, it's not like when you get a press release with an embargo for a week later and you have plenty of time. Everything now is immediate, and that's really tough because all of the information, people are also tuned into that information so acutely that everything has a big impact. So we have to get it right and we have to get it fast. And those things are often not compatible.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. There's so many reports that come in and out as new so it can be very confusing, especially with the embargoes being so short, as you said. I want to bring up one thing. You know, we talked about science is back. Well, science is now elevated in this current administration to a cabinet post, and we have a slide of Dr. Eric Lander, a geneticist, who will head the Office of Science and Technology, and he's a professor at MIT. But you two, Nina and Apoorva, I'm sorry to say, but you don't know this, but you know, we're STI alums, and guess what? So is Eric Lander. All of us STIvies are like, yay! He's up in that office, so that's really fun. And he's joined by other doctors that are in genetics. Well, he's genetics, chemistry, geophysics, social sciences. So it's actually, just I think that the level of information that you guys get and have to report on will be so much improved compared to what we've had over the past few years.
Yeah, and maybe we can look at the graphs of COVID. So we saw that first spike back in April, pretty much March, April, mostly centered on the East Coast, but also seen in Seattle, Washington area. Then we saw this second, much larger spike, but it looks on this graph and in the next graph that we'll show that the cases may actually be decreasing. So Apoorva, it's so easy as humans to take one little nugget and expand it. So how do you take this information guidance do you give as a journalist, not as a physician, to help us understand these numbers?
So it's not completely unexpected that we would see a drop, right? Because as the numbers started to surge, especially right after the holidays, there was a big peak and people did start to follow precautions again. Nobody has really done a full lockdown, but there have been sort of halfway lockdowns in several places. And so you do expect the numbers to come down. But I think when we cover it, it's really important to also say, this is not necessarily permanent. If people stop being careful, it's going to go up again. It's also going to go up if the variant that's been identified in the UK takes off in a big way in the United States. If one of the variants that's been identified in South Africa or Brazil come here, those are also more transmissible, and we are not going to see low numbers. I mean, that the one in the UK, it's started there first identified in September. You saw by December how quickly it caught on and became the predominant source of infections. And that could happen in the United States. So we really have no room for complacency. And I think when we cover the fact that the numbers are dropping, it's also important to caution people about how that could easily go wrong again.
Yeah, you've had a fair amount of Twitter discussion actually about, and just wrote an article, I believe, on not calling it the South African variant and labeling, basically, calling it the China flu was a bad thing. Like no one should have even gone there, but that happened. And so now we're trying to not politicize or alienate any further as we describe these mutations, because what's important is that these viruses are spreading and we don't actually know where it was started. We know where it was sequenced first. And Nina, you actually wrote about a California variant that's out there that they actually named CAL, which is funny. Okay, so they were like, don't label it SA, South Africa this, but now, there's one that you just wrote about that's a California variant.
Right. And, they're calling it Cal 20C, and it is potential. And I remember, California is, and especially Southern California is now, I don't know if it's the epicenter of the country, but it is certainly the number of our cases. We were up to 20% positivity within the past week or so. So, dramatic increase in case numbers per day. Los Angeles County has 10 million people, and we were having 20,000 new cases per day, and the hospitals were overrun, 0% ICU capacity. So we were sort of what New York was back in April. And there is this new variant that has been identified in California, and it is potentially the reason that we're having such high cases. It is not exclusive to California, just as the UK variant is not exclusive to the UK, and the so-called South African variant is not exclusive to South Africa. This California variant is now being seen all over. And it's actually, I think it has like 5 mutations. So it is more significantly different as far as the spike protein than the original COVID-19 that we all know so well right now. So, there's a concern that this California variant, we're not really sure yet how well, and this is what, many of us in healthcare are concerned about. Is it going to be susceptible to the vaccine? Because they have this vaccine, everybody's getting these vaccines, or a lot of people are getting the vaccines. Will these variants be covered? And I think looking forward, that is really going to be the $1 trillion question about how we're going to deal with this.
And for our viewers and listeners, first of all, viruses mutate all the time. And what's important about these mutations that we're seeing is that they're becoming more sticky, meaning that they're able to transmit and stay with a person a little bit longer. And as you brought up, Nina, we are concerned about whether the vaccinations that I received, both of mine, Suju's pending for her next one, whether it's going to be protective. And what's good news that we've heard is both Moderna and Pfizer have said that they've tested their vaccines against the UK variant, and I believe also the New Zealand has a variant, and that was effective against them. So it will confer some protection, but we still have to, wear our masks and do our part. We have a picture of a slide of Dr. Fauci back on center stage where he should be, because I think he felt liberated. Oh, thank the Lord for liberation to speak freely about science. So this is, I think, a big change that's going to impact everyone's reporting as well.
So, we're seeing different vaccine rates in the world. Like you're seeing that Israel has been very, very efficient at vaccinating much of its population. We can have a big political discussion, but we're a medical show. So Israel's been really successful. The rollout in the US has been very difficult. I will tell you personally, I got my vaccine and will get my second one because I'm a healthcare provider. My aging mother-in-law, has had a bear of a time getting an appointment. It's been very, very confusing. Children, grandchildren have been going on the computer, typing away like it used to be to get Madonna tickets or something, right? So, or maybe Bruce Springsteen tickets or whoever tickets. And so it's hard. The rollout has been difficult here. We're also seeing that the rollout of vaccines is not necessarily going to the places hit hardest by the virus.
Right.
So, Apoorva, maybe you can talk to us about that a little bit. We have a little map of Chicago that gives us an idea of the heaviest hit areas in red and dark red, and then the areas that are actually getting the vaccine in dark blue are actually the lightest affected areas, the more affluent areas. So Apoorva, perhaps you can talk to us about that.
As you know, the people hit hardest by the pandemic are people from underrepresented communities, African Americans, Latinx community, and those are the people who cannot afford to just leave their job for multiple hours during the day and go stand in line and get a vaccine. So the way that the rollout has been coordinated so far, or not coordinated rather, it's been very haphazard, and it is going to be extremely difficult for people in those communities to get the vaccine. I think what really needs to happen for them to get the vaccine is for us to have things like mobile vans that actually go into that community. And I believe the Biden administration does plan to roll some of that out. So, the initial rollout was extremely slow and extremely terrible. But I think that's picking up. We're up to 1 million vaccinations a day now, and it's going to pick up even more. And I think as the federal government coordinates better with state and local divisions, we will see the distribution be a little bit more equitable. I'm not going to say it's going to solve everything, but I think it will be better than it has been.
And that's it. We have a slide looking at the rates per country, if we can just pull that up, in terms of vaccination. And I think part of the issues are that who do you trust to get it? Like us, at both the institutions I'm at, and Suja can attest to that as well. 85% of physicians went and got the vaccine as soon as it came out, and we were able to sign up for it. And I think in these communities that are not getting vaccinated, it's a part of who they trust and how are they going to roll this out. And I think just bringing a truck in may not be as effective as maybe getting the local pharmacists involved. I know in Michigan, in many states, the pharmacists are able to offer this vaccine. So I think all of that is going to impact how we distribute the vaccine and how we get people to get on board. And it's also very important to have, just as it is, having people in leadership, that look like you. It's important for, I think, different communities to have doctors, nurses that they can kind of affiliate with, that come into their neighborhoods to do the vaccinations as well.
And I think we've seen there's a real trickle down effect of that, because Dr. Kizbekia Corbett, who's at the NIH, and she's an African American researcher, she got very sort of publicly vaccinated. And then I saw other Black researchers and doctors say, oh, I really trust her, and she got the vaccine. And I was a little hesitant, but I think I'll take it now. And then it trickled down from there. So it's so important for leaders of these communities who do trust the vaccine to be front and center. And you're absolutely right. If you have a mobile van come in and there's nobody actually represented from that community, there's way too much mistrust for that to go over. So it will be really important to coordinate at the local level. It's almost like how we used to think about rolling out public health initiatives in other countries. We've learned the hard way from many of those projects that they are not successful unless we can get local leaders involved and get the message out. And that's kind of what has to happen with this vaccine.
I think
So, you know, we've
social
had,
media influencers as well is important, right? Especially in this era versus what we've done at other times. Suji put up a great slide on how people are trying to get the vaccine now and what the process is, so our listeners really understand the difficulties that are involved. If we could pull up that slide, right, Suju?
yeah, so I was, you know, this is what I've heard from people. I've gotten lots of, you know, direct messages, phone calls from people. How do I get my mom vaccinated? How do I do this? I saw Jake Tapper tweeted out that he couldn't get his mother a vaccine for love or money. And finally, he found a Rite Aid somewhere in Philadelphia that was giving out vaccines. So, you know, this is not the way to roll out, as we all know. But you're right. And I think we all believe that after a rocky start with really no plan, we are now able to move forward with a plan, with national guidance, but actually empowering and enabling locales and communities to take care of it. We have people watching from all over. We have Tim Stone is walking along the banks of the Delaware in Pennsylvania and watching us. We have people watching from all over the country and usually all over the world. We have some interesting questions from people that we've had before and now, and maybe we can do a bit of a lightning round. So, Nina, should people wear 2 masks when they go out?
So, you know, some of the new studies are showing that, or, you know, some of the new pieces are showing that everyone should wear, if everyone wore an N95, just one, that would, I don't think anything is going to obliterate this pandemic, but that would significantly reduce the pandemic. So that's one option, is for everyone to wear an N95, which used to be so coveted and so hard to find. 2 masks are often better than one, but I just want to say that in our office, they were saying, you know, we were wearing N95s and we were wearing surgical masks over them. But apparently that is not OSHA approved. Occupational and Safety and Health Administration does not approve 2 masks because the second mask can enable the N95 to leak. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy there, that the 2 masks are going to give you double protection, but will the second mask push the first mask away from your face, that you'll actually have more exposure from it? So I think if you're wearing a tightly fitted mask and it's fitting well, it should be fine. I think that there are not enough people wearing masks to begin with. So if we can get people to wear at least 1 mask, that would be wonderful. 2 can be better than 1, but I think it's not necessarily the case.
That's interesting. You know, my nose is so squashed at the end of a day.
And these lines.
These lines, the skin is gone. So I don't know. I don't think my second surgical mask is doing anything that other than making me feel happy, frankly.
So back at the time of when we were doing surgeries and wore that second mask, we were also preserving our N95s, trying to make sure that, you know, they lasted. So you'd put another surgical mask over it. Yeah, but they're brutal, the marks that are left. Apoorva, we have other questions, and I know that you can answer this just because of all the research you've done. Do you have to wear a mask after you've been vaccinated?
Yes, you actually do, at least for the foreseeable future. And I know that people are really unhappy about this one. I've seen a lot of pushback. You know, why should I even bother to get vaccinated if I still have to wear a mask and do all the things I'm doing now? Well, you will be protected if you are vaccinated from getting sick. So I would hope that that's already enough reason to get vaccinated. But also by wearing a mask, you might protect other people from getting infected, because the vaccine will protect people from getting sick, but it will not necessarily prevent them from getting infected. So they might still have virus in their nose and breathe it out onto other people, even if they themselves never feel any symptoms. And so it is important, at least until we have a certain number of people vaccinated in this country, that we continue to wear masks, even if we've been immunized. I will say that there are some data coming in the next few weeks, which will tell us exactly how big that risk is. It's possible it's really minimal and we may not have to, but we don't know that yet. So for the time being, we should wear masks.
This has been an incredible year of learning right? And how everyone is now a virologist. I'm sure you guys get this in the comment section after you write an article, which we'll get to later. But it is so much learning and sharing of information. And I'm so proud to be a physician and scientist, and because of the sharing that's occurred and how it has moved our world forward. You know, this past year has been horrible for so many deaths, but in a sense, it has really elevated our sense of the world as one and what we can do all together. So I think, you know, that's one bright spot. Nina, what's the right time to wait in between vaccinations?
So for the two that we have currently, there's the Moderna and the Pfizer. So Pfizer is 21 days. It does not need to be exact. So if it's 22 days or 23 days, certainly at our hospital, they gave us a little bit of a window depending on our schedules. So, but it's about 3 weeks between the first and the second dose. And then for the Moderna, it's about 4 weeks. So that's the interval. And I think that those were the intervals that were studied. A lot of people are saying, well, they must be two different vaccines. Which one is better? I get a lot of that for the people that do have access to vaccines. Which one should I get? Like it's a a fashion decision. Should I get Gucci or Louis? Really get what you can get. They're close to identical. The two, they're not identical, but they're pretty close. So I really, say that just get whatever is available. So it's a 3-week interval or a 4-week interval. That's really it. We are estimating based on the data that about 7 to 14 days after the second dose of either, you are 95% likely to be immune. That is not 100%, but 95% for a vaccine is exceptional. And but really, again, as Apoorva was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean masks off and we're good to go and let's have that dinner party. We're not there yet. I don't think we're there anywhere in this country or in this world. Maybe in Israel.
One of the points that people have asked me is if they got the Pfizer shot for their first shot, can they get the Moderna for their second? And the answer is no. If you're getting Pfizer the first time, please get Pfizer the second time, and same for Moderna. But people are asking, there are other vaccines that are not approved in the United States, but are certainly being approved and used elsewhere. Apoorva, can you tell us a bit about the Sputnik vaccine and the I think it's called Novavax, the one that's been used in India, the Oxford AstraZeneca one. Can you tell us a bit about what the research shows for that?
So the ones that are really out there right now are the Pfizer, Moderna, but Oxford is the one that's being used in India. It's being produced locally by the Serum Institute, which is a very experienced vaccine maker. So I have high confidence in that one. There's also another vaccine that's been given an emergency authorization in India that's made by a local company, Bharat Biotech, except that we have not seen final data for that. We have not seen the phase 3, the big trial data for that. So it's a little bit weird that they have given it authorization. I don't think it's been used yet, but it's a little bit unusual to do that. There's also, as you mentioned, the Sputnik, which is the Russian vaccine, and then there's Sinovac, which is a Chinese one. Those are not as good as Pfizer and Moderna. Their protection is about 60%, 50% around there. But I will point out that the FDA was willing to approve any vaccine, or at least give emergency authorization to any vaccine for the coronavirus that was 50% protective. That's kind of what we were hoping for at a minimum. So 60% is not terrible either. AstraZeneca is also not super high, but Moderna and Pfizer are just amazingly good. So it seems like we should aim for that for everything, but we may not need that. I think these other vaccines will probably be good enough.
I think that AstraZeneca Oxford one was around close to 90%, I thought, which is still better than like the flu. If you look at the flu vaccine and the way that virus mutates, every year when they look at what was around and they make these vaccines, it's still about 40 to 60% effective. So for 95% for this new mRNA vaccine, it's really spectacular. And I thought, though, that AstraZeneca was, maybe it was 85% to 90, which when you hear 95, you're like, woohoo, let's go there. Let's go get that.
Well, they had a bit of a strange protocol. So the numbers from Oxford are a little hard to interpret directly because they had a sort of problem with their protocol. They ended up giving a half dose to some people, and then that seemed to work better. There's some confusion with that one, but I think it's good and it will do the job.
So we have another question from Bhargavi that maybe we can address to Nina. Is there a difference between the KN95s and the N95s? And what if you order the N95s online? What's the reliability, let's say, of those?
So when we were first sort of dug into this pandemic, N95s again was this coveted item, and in California, certainly in Southern California, N95s are not new because we live in fire country. So most homes have their sort of stash of N95s. The difference is we have that little valve. It's like a Passimir valve that we call it now, like a COVID spit valve. So any masks, regardless of N95 or KN95 or fashion statements with those little vents or valves, that is great. It makes it really comfortable because when you breathe, it actually opens it up. So forget about those. Those really don't count. You might as well just be wearing a screen door. So
early on, I have to say, Nina, early on in the pandemic, you posted a picture of yourself blowing out a candle through the N95 with that circle thing. And we actually showed it on the show, so thank you very much. And I'm like, oh my God, this video is worth 1,000 words, because you were easily able to blow out, let's say, a birthday candle wearing something that's supposed to be sealing your aerosol in. So thank you for that.
Yeah, those were incredible, and it's great if you're in a fire or if you're in smoke, or in construction. That's really what they're for, because it protects the wearer. But it actually is worse because you're going to be breathing and it's going to concentrate your breath through that little spit valve. So those are a no, and those are actually labeled as N95. So those are out. N95s now are really the kind that we use in the hospitals, and oftentimes they're fit tested, meaning that we test to see which one creates the best seal. So that's what the N95s are. You can still now purchase them, and you just want to make sure that they're not leaking on the sides. The difference, a KN95, from what I understand, is it's not made in the United States, but it has similar. So the 95 is 95% protection, is similar protection as the N95s. I think they're manufactured in China, but they do give excellent protection for the wearer as well as for people around them. So those are fine. I don't think they can be fit tested though. And they tend to have the straps that go around the ears as opposed to behind the head. So there's sometimes a little bit of a gap. But I think that those are an excellent option. And again, people are not wearing masks as much as they should. So at this point, I know we're saying that N95s are the best or double masks, but just wear a mask. If we can get that done for I would say 30% of the population that's still not wearing masks at all, we'll be in much better shape.
The current administration, if you've listened to President Biden speak, he has said that if we wear masks, for the next 100 days, we really will be able to decrease the rate of infection. Although we see it's coming down, but it's still super high. And so I think that that's an important piece of information to wear the mask and wear a proper one. The gaiters are not that great. They slide down. They're not protective for you or for the people around you. And these masks, the N95 is very uncomfortable to wear, as we said. KN95s are far superior, and they do seem very similar. But of course, N95, I feel like the N95, because it is fit tested to your face, is really the best one. But that's hard to get the populace at large to get tested and to get fitted. I mean, that's a lot harder.
Yeah. So we have a question about vaccine distribution. So we've talked about the fact that the two that are currently approved in the U.S., require 2 shots each. And initially, let's say if you had 50 million doses available, you were giving 25 million doses and then holding the second dose to give at 3 or 4 weeks to the same people. Israel seems to have been able to vaccinate much more percentage of its population, Chris Ramanathan writes, because they are actually giving all 50 million doses out and then waiting for the replenishment of the stockpile. So Apoorva, we're going to show a little line graph of the different countries and how successful they've been. And maybe you can explain to us what the thinking is, because you put together the medicine, the economics, the social science of all of this when you report.
Yeah, so there are two trains of thought on how to do this. The Biden transition team said that they would release all of the doses and not hold any, and right after that, the Trump administration did the same thing. I think it is important to get the vaccine out to as many people as possible, so that it's a well-reasoned decision to release all of the doses. But there is another train of thought that says we don't know if we will have enough doses to give everybody the second dose. What if we run out? I'm not sure that that's going to be a problem. I think there will be enough doses coming in over the next few months to cover everybody who's being vaccinated now. But vaccine production is tricky. Things go wrong. Entire batches go wrong because of contamination or whatever other problems. There are only so many glass vials and things like that. So there could be manufacturing snags that keep us from getting those second doses. So that is what makes some people nervous, because what you're doing when you only give one dose is that you are giving the virus a low protection. You're basically giving it a chance to maybe adapt to the immune protection, because the virus might still be in your body, or you might still get infected, but the immune protection is not strong enough to completely suppress it. It's a theoretical possibility, but all of these are theoretical because we did not test one dose.
Right. So of the 2-dose ones, we didn't test 1 dose, but what they did in those studies show was that at 10 days after the first dose, you had about 80% of immunity versus the 95% after the second. Nina, I want to ask you, there was a question from one of our viewers about anaphylaxis that can occur with these vaccines, and if it's something that everyone should be very concerned about.
So anaphylaxis, which is really a severe allergic reaction, is very rare. And one thing that we should just sort of mention about the vaccine contents is that things like egg protein, or certainly any sort of peanut protein, or any sort of obvious food allergens are not present in these vaccines. So, in the past, when people have been concerned about the flu vaccine, that it has a certain protein that you might be allergic to begin with, that's not the case. So anaphylaxis is a very quick allergic reaction that usually occurs within the first 10 to 15 minutes after receiving a potential allergen. And there was a batch of Moderna, and it was in California, part of it was in California, where there was a cluster of severe allergic reactions, and they actually pulled the bunch of doses off the shelf for a while because they found this cluster. But then looking at the larger picture, for both of the vaccines, it's I think for Pfizer it's about 2 in a million, and for Moderna it's about 6 in a million. So extremely rare. And when you go to get your vaccine, you're going to be in a place where an anaphylactic reaction can be treated. So I'm actually volunteering to give vaccines this coming week at one of the megapods in the Los Angeles area. It's really exciting. And so they're training us how to treat anaphylactic reactions if we are not comfortable doing that. So is it possible? Anything is possible. It's extraordinarily rare to have an anaphylactic reaction to these vaccines. It is, we're going to see it. And the more vaccines that are given around the world, we're going to see more of it, as we're going to see, some strange reactions to anything, but it's not something where you necessarily need to be concerned, that it's going to happen to you. It's extraordinarily rare.
You know, you talked about volunteering to give vaccines, and there are people who are non-medical personnel who are volunteering because there's so much involved with giving the vaccine. There's just checking people in, there's documentation, there's lots of non-medical aspects. Should all of those people be wearing N95 masks when they are in that arena? And Sudha Parekh asks, should we be wearing double masks if we're going to an area that may have more positivity rate?
So I think that for the volunteers, yes, they should be wearing N95s. I think most of the volunteer sites, so the ones that we're doing in California, are these megapods. So most of them are drive-throughs in stadiums. I don't know. I think Disneyland has made it to the news as being a megapod or a superpod. You do not get to go on the rides, but unfortunately,
I'm not going. Forget it.
Exactly. You go on. It's just the parking lot. And same with Dodger Stadium. You're not going to be able to watch, a training session. Some of the players. But the volunteers are actually going to be provided with PPE. They're encouraged to bring their own. So, that'll save the PPE of the Departments of Public Health. So I think that they should be wearing N95s if they're going to be in contact with any other people, certainly unvaccinated people for sure. And then again, as far as the double masks go, I think that again, are 2 masks better than 1 or 3 masks better than 2? I think that really just depends on how you're wearing them. And that if they're loosely fitted and actually the second mask is pushing the first mask open on the sides, it's going to make it worse. But if you have a very densely fibered mask and you have another one on top of it, then the fibers and the protection is actually better. So it's certainly, if it's worn appropriately, 2 masks can be better than 1. But again, 1 mask is certainly better than nothing. And again, even, all over the country and all over the world, we're seeing so many people without masks that I think that's still a concern that we need to address.
So, we're getting people commenting and watching from all over. As I said, we're getting really great questions in. Apoorva, I'm going to hit you with a couple of questions. First, there's a question of whether a second dose is considered too much for an old elderly, a 96-year-old person. And then the next thing I want to ask you is about these variants. They have some funny scientific names. They've been named geographically, and maybe we can get into that a little bit and what that means in terms of vaccination, protection, getting past this pandemic. But let's start with the 96-year-old.
Question.
The question. Oh, I've lost it.
It's up there. Vasanthi Akuma wrote. Are you muted? Let's see. My mother-in-law is 96. Should she get the second dose? Will it be too strong for her?
Yeah, so I don't want to tell Vasanthi what to do with her mother-in-law, but I will say that the second dose is important to make sure that the vaccine is strong and the protection lasts a really long time. It also really depends on the health of the mother-in-law. So again, want to be very clear that I'm not giving medical advice here.
Yeah.
But most people who have a stronger reaction with the second dose still just have body aches and fever. They're not dangerous reactions, but she should really talk to her doctor.
Yeah. Her doctor. The one thing I'll say also on that is that, look at your initial reaction with the vaccine. And if she had a very strong reaction initially, then that's definitely something that she should talk to her doctor about and discuss. But the second question for you, Apoorva, is about all the variants and how to make sense of it. So we're going to let you take off.
Yeah. So actually, before I talk about the variants, I wanted to mention there's one other mask option that no one has mentioned, and it's been recommended by a lot of epidemiologists. KF94. Those are made in Korea. They're available on Amazon. They're actually great. They're not as good as N95s, but they're pretty good. So look into those. And then about the variants. So somebody mentioned earlier, viruses mutate. That's what they do. We expect them to mutate. We expect them to change over time. The thing about this virus has been that it has collected mutations of interest, mutations of concern a little faster than a lot of virologists expected. And that's partly because we've had so many people infected across the world, because every single person that a virus infects is like another opportunity, many opportunities for the virus to mutate. And what has happened with this virus is that scientists had predicted some particular spots in the virus's structure that are particularly prone to mutation, and which mutations might come up there that would be beneficial to the virus. And that is exactly what has happened. For example, there's a mutation called E484K. That's in the South Africa variant, the one that's been found in South Africa. It's in the one found in Brazil. And it's also the one that seems to have the biggest impact on vaccines effectiveness. And that's something that was predicted and that has evolved independently in those places. And that when that happens, and it's evolved along with some other mutations. And when that happens, it's a signal that that cluster of mutations is very important to the virus. It's giving the virus some really strong advantage or edge. Last weekend, I wrote an explainer, sort of a Q&A about how we should be thinking about variants and vaccines. And I spoke to a number of researchers who are very, well-versed in this. And that's not the article that you're showing right now, because I wrote the explainer and I filed it. And then that's Monday. That was the long weekend. And on the Monday, South African scientists presented data showing that this variant actually does not respond well to vaccines in some people that they had tested. So the explainer that I wrote was very reassuring. Don't worry, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. And all the scientists said that. In fact, one of the scientists I spoke to said, the average person should not lose any sleep over this. But after the South African data came out, another paper also came out looking at vaccines, and they both showed that the vaccines are less effective against the mutations found in the South Africa variant and the Brazil variant. So when I went back to those same experts and asked, would you still stand by what you said before and say that this is not that worrying? They all said, no, we're actually a little worried now. We're concerned. And the scientist who told me that no average person should lose sleep over this said, I would not say that now. So I'm not trying to scare anybody. I think the vaccines will still work, but they will be less effective against some of these variants that are coming up. And what that really means is that we have to bring down the number of infections as fast as we can and vaccinate as many people as we can as fast as we can, because we need to give the virus fewer opportunities to mutate more.
So I think that leads to this concept of herd immunity, right? So there's different ways of getting herd immunity, the herd of human beings. We can all get sick, which is a terrible way, or most of us get vaccinated. So Nina, I'm going to throw two questions at you. One is, what percentage of people really need to be vaccinated before we can think that we have some herd immunity and maybe take our masks down? And then there's a question from Miriam Berkeley asking, how often can she reuse her mask? At what point is it unreusable?
So herd immunity is really, thankfully, we can finally start talking about it in a positive way, because until we had vaccines, herd immunity concept of infections was astounding, because that would literally mean, over 2 million deaths in this country alone. So herd immunity for this virus, which is, and it depends on the virus and it depends on the vaccine, but for this virus, we're saying in the 70 to even up to 85% range of people being vaccinated. That's a very high number, and it's hopefully attainable. I'm a little bit concerned because I know, it was mentioned that, about, 90+% of physicians were getting this vaccine when it was available. But if you look at healthcare workers overall, it's closer to 60 to 70% uptake. So if the healthcare workers are concerned, that's concerning for the general population. But we do need about 70 to 85% of the population immunized, fully immunized, to hopefully attain herd immunity. So I think it's possible. It's going to take a lot of work. I think the 1 million immunizations a day is a lovely number, but it is much too low. We're at about 1 million per day now. We need to be closer to 2 million per day to get to herd immunity relatively quickly. Reusing a mask. So that's a great question. So when we, again, I think Marina mentioned this, when this first started, we were, holding this N95, and here was your N95, your one. Was it for a week? Was it for a month? Was it for this entire pandemic? So that's how we were using our N95s. We had a in-hospital system where we would put the N95 in a little paper bag, and it would get through this cleaning process, and we would reuse it when it came back through this special, I think, UV cleaning. It depends on the mask. So if it's a surgical mask, those tend to absorb moisture a little bit more, and they get kind of wet, almost like a paper towel. So those tend to be more of a one-time use if you're using it all day. If you're just running out to, say, like walk your dog, and you have a surgical mask and it's pretty clean, you can reuse it. So I think for those, it's really just a matter of feel. If it's feeling kind of sticky, throw it out. For the N95s, that also depends on how you're wearing it, how long you're wearing it. I think, for surgeons and most people in healthcare, I put my N95 on in my car before I get out of my car, and I toss it right before I get back in my car. So it's the entire day. I do not take it off for the entire time that I am physically at work. So that's a long time. So it gets kind of used. So it really depends on, and obviously if you have the cloth masks, I recommend laundering them and air drying them. And usually they last a pretty long time, but it really just depends on how long you're wearing it for and what you're doing. And, if it's getting kind of gross inside the mask, then you have to toss it.
So I want to ask you guys, because we are running out of time. This hour has gone so quickly. A little bit about each of your journeys, how you got to where you are right now, what prompted you to consider this. I will tell you, I hated writing as a kid. Like, I could read books and write. I just hated writing. Just still, my writer's block is like immense. Now I've taken to dictating into my phone, and that makes it a little bit easier, but it's still so hard to write. So I'm impressed and so excited to have you guys come on, because while I'm never going to be a writer, maybe I'll be less blocky about it. So Apoorva, let's start with you first.
Well, I actually started out thinking I wanted to be a scientist, very common story among science journalists. And then I decided, no, I actually would much rather just write about it much faster and don't have to spend years in a lab to learn about something. I've actually written or edited copy for scientists most of my career. So it's been really fun to be at the Times and get to write for a very mainstream audience. But my scientific background helps me quite a bit because I get to eavesdrop on Twitter conversations between scientists and figure out where the stories are coming from. But it's also been, challenging, I will say, in this pandemic, because everything is so fast. I'm a pretty fast reporter and writer, but even for me, it's been insane to have to write something very complicated. Like that piece I was just talking about, I had written the entire thing. And then I had to basically scrap it all to be less reassuring and do all new reporting and get it out there. So I don't think that there's anybody who really loves writing. And if they say that, they're either lying or I hate them. It's tough to do it. But I think being on deadline helps. If you don't have time, you kind of have to get it done. There's just no other choice. But when it's a longer story, I also have writer's block. In fact, I took a screenshot of my screen the other day because I hadn't even written a word, and I sent it to my editor and said, I've made a lot of progress today. It was like not one word on it. So, we all have writer's block, but a deadline, very helpful.
So, when I read your articles, both of yours, the meat is obviously in what you've written, but the headlines are sometimes a little attention grabbing. So what kind of control do you have over your headline and what those writers do, which may, that's a little bit more of a clickbait feel sometimes, whereas the article itself is really full of substance. So Marina, maybe you can talk to us about that. Forbes is so clickbaity, right?
No. So that's a good question. So if I submit a piece to a journal, or if it's an op-ed, I may have a suggestion for a title, but that becomes the decision of the outlet. They really make the title that works for what they would want. But when I write for Forbes, we do create our own titles, and the platform that we use gives us it doesn't really give suggestions, but it will give feedback, like this is too weak, or this doesn't make sense, or it's too long, or it's too short. I've never gotten the feedback that it's too clickbaity, but you want to have information in the title. I think the title is such an important part of the article, without it being too sensational or too, out there and, come in and I gotcha and I tricked you. It's not really what it's about. But, I think it has to have enough content that people will know that this is going to be about a certain topic. And yes, it has to be interesting and it has to draw in an audience, but it also has to have some value. It can't just be, all, lights and bells and whistles, but it's a fun process to think of the title. Actually, that's one of my favorite parts of writing for Forbes is making a title that will work. It's a fun little process.
Nancy Ross just wrote in that you guys are terrific guests, and I certainly, Marina and I echo that you've really presented us with a lot of information. Three of us, one of these things is not like the other. So three of us are surgeons. How did you find a second passion, Nina? Because there's so much passion in our first job. How did you find that passion to start writing and hone your craft in a way that is accessible? We tend to say centimeter instead of centimeter. We tend to use, multi-syllables when one syllable will do. So we tend to ask long-winded questions, apparently. So what was that journey for you?
So that was just a way of communicating. I just look at writing as one way of communicating. So there's speaking, there's interacting with patients. I work with families since I take care of children in my practice. So I just found that writing, and it just sort of came out organically. I just started writing little pieces here and there, appearing on sort of non-medical sites, and it's an interesting way of looking at things, is really how to communicate with different audiences. So we talk to fellow surgeons a certain way. I may talk to pediatricians a certain way, or pediatric anesthesiologists a certain way. It gets very specific. And then how do you talk to journalists or scientists or the lay public or parents? So I like to kind of find the sweet spot for different audiences. And that's how my writing came about. And a lot of it came from great questions from families, having nothing to do with ENT or pediatric ENT, not always even about health, but it sort of forces you to think about how you're going to answer a question. So I actually wanted to be a journalist. I know that's nobody likes writing, but I actually do like writing in some ways. So it's kind of, my second act, or, it's hard, I don't call it a second career, but it's just, I love it. I find it challenging and thankfully, there's always something to write about.
Apoorva, I want to jump to you just because we're running out of time as well. And both of you have likely experienced this, but especially you, Apoorva, because the New York Times is so online. And you do also have a Twitter presence as well as Nina. But when you've written certain things, you've gotten trolled. It's hard to do when you see negative messages come through. Just quickly, if you could tell us how you handle that, because it's appalling at times.
Yeah, it's been really kind of an education for me, writing about COVID, because it really brings people to extremes, people who really hate lockdowns, or people who really think we should be on lockdown, or kids should go to school, kids shouldn't go to school. All of these things really trigger people in very strong ways. A year ago, I would have just batted against people when they were nasty. And I'm really learning that I'm not just speaking for myself. I have the New York Times behind me, and that is a big institution. So I really try to remember that they are asking me not just as Apoorva, but as a New York Times reporter. And so I try to engage with as many people as I can. I try to answer questions and actually try to give them information. But when they get really nasty and start to swear at me or call me names, block, mute. Every once in a while it gets to me, but for the most part, I just kind of take it in stride. I know that it's part of being a part of the New York Times brand.
All right, Apoorva, thank you, because that takes a lot of pride to not react and have a retaliatory session, something that we all worry about in social media, because it can always come back to us in negative ways. I want to thank you both so much for joining us. Against Apoorva Mandavilli, who is a New York Times reporter, Dr. Nina Shapiro, pediatric ENT, and also health contributor for Forbes. Thank you guys both for joining us. We want to give a shout out to our team. These are our producers who make this happen. And then next week, Suju, you want to introduce what we're doing?
Yeah, so next week we are not live, but we will be replaying our prior show from January 17th, which featured Lash Nolan and Alec Kalick, who are both medical students. It was a terrific show, and I hope if you missed it, or if you caught it the first time, watch it again, and we will be back live on February 7th with a brand new show. See you then. Stay safe. Wear a mask.